Welcome back, guys. I'm so glad to be back here. So sorry for the long delay. I think it's been almost 3 weeks now, for sure 2 weeks, almost 3 weeks since I have made my last video. But I figured with the end of football season, I figured I'd do something a little more into a longer type of video, kind of what I did on my last one, kind of just sit here and talk with you guys about my opinions. So what I'm going to do today is going to be really, really interesting. I am going to do a not a top 10, but a top 9 Ohio State quarterbacks. The reason I'm doing a top 9 and not a top 10 is because I was so young during, 2011 and 2009 and stuff. I don't remember any of that. I'm sorry, I didn't even top 9 Ohio State quarterbacks. The reason I'm not doing top 10 is because I don't remember a lot of stuff from 2009, 2010. So I'm not really going to be able to talk about that and give my, full opinions on that without, basically copying pasting other people's opinions of what they saw. It's just, I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to give you a top 9 Ohio State quarterbacks. The last 9 Ohio State quarterbacks, I'm going to rank them. And I think this is really fun. I've been thinking about doing this video for a very, very long time. And I've been given, all these stats and looking up stuff and looking up records and other people's opinions. Of course, I've bounced off, but mostly they have been my own. Of course, the more recent we go, the probably more in depth I'll be on stuff. But this is going to be really, really fun for me, and I hope this is going to be a really good video for you guys, and not in maybe you guys learn something from this video, agree or disagree with me on where I put these rankings. Of course, if you disagree with stuff, please let me know, and I will for sure get back to you in the comment section below. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Alright, so here is the list right here. I definitely think there is going to be a little bit of disagreements from some people, but please just let me know if you have anything that you disagree about in this list. I'm just going to go person by person. We're going to go from 9 to 1. And I'm just going to give you guys reasonings on why I have this person placed where I do versus, another person. And I'll also give you like all of his stats, some stats that I have written down here and all those other things. So I think this is really a no-brainer at number 9. I have Kyle McCord. Kyle McCord was the full-time starting quarterback in 2023. He did come in for CJ Stroud in 2021 when CJ Stroud had a quote-unquote injury. I think it was really to get CJ something was going on mentally with him. And I think Day kind of was just like, okay, let's give him a break, and if McCord can show us something, maybe we go with McCord instead of Stroud. McCord kind of struggled, and I think the game was against Akron. It was at home, and I think McCord really struggled in that game, and CJ went back in the very next week and never looked back, and then went on to have the career that he did at Ohio State. But full-time starter in 2023, so his career record is 12-1, even though he went 11-1 in 2023. Did not play in the bowl game against Missouri because he ended up transferring out because Ryan Day would not guarantee him the starting job in 2024. So he went 12-1 in his career as a starting quarterback at Ohio State. 0-1 against Michigan, 0 Big Ten championships, of course 0 national championships, 0 bowl wins because he did not play in the bowl game in 2023. He, of course, transfers and goes to Syracuse and, has the season that he does have, and it's a really, really good season. I don't know if he's on a particular NFL team. He might be like a backup or on the practice squad at somewhere. I'm not really sure. But, 0 college football playoff appearances, only had the 1 year, was really, really close. Went 11-1 and went up to Ann Arbor and lost to the eventual national champions in Ann Arbor, and had a really decent game, but threw the game away with those 2 interceptions and cost Ohio State 7 points on the first interception. I think it was like the first or second drive in the first quarter against Michigan in that game, and tried to give it to Marvin Harrison Jr. and the Michigan corner, I think it was Will Johnson, cuts the route, or maybe even Sanderstill. And he jumps the route, picks off Kyle McCord, and Michigan scores. And they ended up winning by, I think, 4 in that game. So right there, that cost us the game right there. And then, of course, the game sealing interception from Michigan. Ohio State was trying to get back into the end zone. And Michigan iced the game, and of course they go on into the playoff, beat Alabama and beat Washington in the national championship game, and win the national championship in 2023, which really, really hurt Ohio State fans because, once again, Ohio State was so close to being in the playoff in playing Alabama and maybe even playing Washington in the national championship game, but so close, but yet so far. I also believe, along with a lot of other Ohio State fans, that in that year, Kyle McCord really, really held us back. His inability to scramble and improvise, basically. And if you remember in that 2023 game against Michigan, Ohio State had a pass rush, but it was negated because of J.J. McCarthy's ability to get out of the pocket and make throws. And Kyle McCord just never had that. And Ohio State's offensive line still wasn't great. Anyways, they had a lot of guys leave from the 2022 year, and Ohio State's development of the offensive line, really since Ryan Day came into Ohio State as the head coach in 2019, Ohio State's development and recruiting from the offensive line has kind of fallen off a cliff a little bit. And, that showed this year, of course. But really in 2023, the offensive line was really not helped by Kyle McCord's inability to scramble around, maybe make some plays with his feet, improvise, get out of the pocket, and do all those things. So I really think that Kyle McCord deserves to be number 9 on this list. And, I think a lot of Ohio State fans, especially, me included, are kind of bitter towards Kyle McCord because of the way he left Ohio State. Felt like he was entitled. I'm putting words in Kyle McCord's mouth, of course, but it almost felt like he thought that he was entitled to the starting quarterback job, and that's never what it is at Ohio State. Maybe it was because CJ was so good when he was here, when Kyle McCord was here. He had CJ Stroud above him, and probably Ryan Day probably guaranteed CJ the starting job, but that was also because CJ in his first year was at the Heisman ceremony, and had Ohio State at 10-2 in 2021, losing to Oregon and then losing to Michigan, but also threw for almost 600 yards, or I think over 600 yards, against Utah in the Rose Bowl that year. So there were some flashes from CJ Stroud, especially after he got benched or got injured before when Kyle McCord came in for CJ Stroud in 2021. After that, he never looked back. And maybe Ryan Day did guarantee CJ Stroud the starting job, so Kyle McCord was kind of, looking for that. And when Ryan Day didn't do it, he said, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to transfer somewhere else. He ends up transferring to Syracuse. Leads the country in passing, I believe, in 2024. Syracuse has a pretty good year, and it's good. He was a good quarterback for Syracuse. I don't think he was a good fit for Ohio State. And, a lot of his stats, a lot of people can probably point to a lot of his stats. I think a lot of that was due to Ohio State having the elite wide receiver room that they did, and Cade Stover. A lot of people forget Cade Stover was at his peak in 2023. That was his last year at Ohio State. Really, really wanted to go out in a bang. And I believe Cade Stover never beat Michigan. And that was a thing that, before Jack Sawyer was, Jack Sawyer in 2024, there was Cade Stover. And a lot of Ohio State fans looked at Cade Stover like that was our guy. Ohio kid, bleeds scarlet and gray. And, he was really at his peak and really, really trying to get Ohio State over the hump and wasn't able to do that. And neither really was Jack Sawyer. But the difference being with that is Jack Sawyer, of course, won the national championship. Cade Stover did not even make the playoff in his last year. So, really, really good team surrounding Kyle McCord. Marvin Harrison Jr. being in his last year, and he's struggling a little bit in the NFL, but in college, he was wide receiver 1 coming off the board, and, he goes to Arizona in the first round. I think pick 6, maybe? I don't remember what Marvin Harrison Jr. was in the draft. But, had a really, really good year, was in a lot of Heisman Trophy conversations that last year for Ohio State. And, we'll see what he does in his NFL career. But right now, he is probably top 3, top 4 Ohio State wide receivers just based off of their Ohio State career alone. Maybe that's a hot take. I don't really know. I haven't. Maybe I'll do that again. And maybe I'll rank a few wide receivers maybe further down the line in this offseason because it is a long offseason. So, long story short, Kyle McCord, number 9 on my list. Number 8. Maybe this is a hot take, but I have Cardale Jones. And Cardale Jones is he's a really, really good guy for Urban Meyer's system. And, Urban Meyer's system was a quarterback that, could just make the plays that, were there, like the one read type plays. And if the one read wasn't there, he was taking off and he was scrambling and he was falling forward and getting yards after contact. And he was good in 2014, and especially during that playoff run against Wisconsin when Ohio State beat them, I think it was like 59-0 in the Big Ten championship game, which propelled them into the playoff over TCU in that year, which of course then led to, Ohio State going on the run that they did, beating Alabama and beating Oregon in the national championship game, becoming the first ever playoff national champions in 2014. So Cardale Jones comes in for JT Barrett in the Michigan game, beats Michigan, of course. I think that was in Ann Arbor. No, it was in Columbus that year, I think, because 2014. Yeah. So it was in Columbus. JT Barrett goes down. I think broke his leg, maybe. Had something with his leg, of course, was ruled out for the season. Braxton Miller, the projected starter at the beginning of the year, injured his shoulder during practice in the preseason. Never played in 2014. We'll get to him in a second. But Cardale Jones, of course, comes in, beats Wisconsin, beats Alabama, beats Oregon, and a lot of Ohio State fans have a really good have a soft spot for Cardale Jones. But people tend to forget the struggles that he had in 2015. And, there's a really, really good argument that 2015 is one of the best Ohio State teams ever, especially in the modern history. But, every single, the majority of Ohio State's key players from that 2014 year came back in 2015, and Ohio State really expected to win yet another national championship and go back-to-back for the first time in their history and go undefeated. And, they lose to Michigan State, and that's not a Cardale Jones thing. That was more of an Urban Meyer thing that happened there. But when people tend to forget is Cardale Jones was the starter for, Ohio State in 2015, versus Virginia Tech, and was the starter in week 1. And he gets benched for JT Barrett because of the struggles that he had. And, a lot of people tend to forget that, but this has to come into account when you're ranking quarterbacks like this, especially high caliber quarterbacks like Ohio State. So we'll go through it. Cardale Jones, career record of 11-0, was undefeated in his career as a starter for Ohio State. Did not play in the Michigan State game. So as a starter, JT Barrett did, and Michigan State, of course, beat Ohio State in Columbus by a game-winning field goal. We all know that story. Urban Meyer not calling any plays for Ezekiel Elliott in the fourth quarter, and Michigan State goes on and plays in the college football playoff, then gets destroyed by the eventual national champions, Alabama, and was the first shutout in college football playoff history before. And then Ohio State came in 2016 and, did it all over again. So, Cardale Jones, 11-0 in his career at Ohio State. 1-0 against Michigan. I'm going to count that for, I'm going to count the game in 2014 as his record against Michigan. Technically has, I think, 3 pairs of gold pants, but did not play in 2015. I don't know if he was on the team in 2013, but if he was, he does have a pair of gold pants there. And, of course, came in for JT Barrett in 2014, like I've already stated. So we're going to count that as 1-0 against Michigan, undefeated against the Wolverines. A Big Ten championship, like I said before, beating Wisconsin, which propelled them into the playoff. One national championship, like I said before. 2 bowl wins, Alabama and Oregon, right there, and then the one college football playoff appearance, which I already stated. So Cardale Jones, a really really good guy for Ohio State at that time. I don't think that I don't even think he had the higher floor than JT, and he definitely did not have the higher ceiling than JT. I think a lot of Cardale Jones' success was due to the unknown of Cardale Jones. You know, if Cardale Jones would have played the entire season of 2014, does Alabama really look like how they looked defensively? Like they had no idea what to do with Cardale Jones, because Cardale Jones' only game that he played start to finish was the Wisconsin game, and he was just airing it out and not really scrambling a lot and just handing it off to Ezekiel Elliott. And that wasn't, and you know scrambling wasn't really part of Cardale Jones's game, so he does that against Alabama and completes a lot of third downs. I remember in that game using his legs, and Alabama just had no idea what to do. So I think if JT Barrett plays in the Sugar Bowl, I think not only does Alabama win, but I think Alabama wins by multiple scores in that game. So I think a lot of the unknown for Cardale Jones benefited Ohio State in that run against Alabama, and Ohio State against Oregon really out physicaled Oregon in that game. So Cardale really didn't need to do anything special. But when Ohio State had to lean on Cardale Jones and teams knew what Cardale Jones wanted to do, that's where you saw the struggles. And that's where you kind of saw the limitations of having Cardale Jones as your number one quarterback. And, it is what it is. Cardale Jones is at number 8. Let's move on. Number 7, I have Braxton Miller. The only reason I have him at number 7 and ahead of Cardale Jones is because we saw Braxton Miller the reason I have him. Let's start. The reason I have him above Cardale Jones is we saw the flashes of him at quarterback. Before he got injured in 2014, he was on a lot of Heisman races and Heisman boards in the preseason. He was projected to be a top tier quarterback in the country that year. And it is what it is. He gets injured, has a redshirt year in 2014. Of course, Ohio State does what they do in 2014, and he comes back in 2015. And not only does he not play quarterback, he goes to a whole another position and plays wide receiver, and was a really really good wide receiver, and then went on to the NFL and played as a wide receiver. So I think a lot of people saw Braxton Miller's athleticism and said, "Why don't you go play receiver? And maybe there's a future for you at wide receiver." And they were right. Braxton Miller in his first game at wide receiver has the amazing spin move against Virginia Tech, and everyone has seen that video before, and it's a really really cool moment in Ohio State history. And I just think there was a lot bigger higher of a ceiling for Braxton Miller as a wide receiver than as a quarterback. That's why I have him ranked this low. But I also wanted to say how I have him ranked ahead of Cardale Jones, because we've seen the flashes of Braxton Miller. Has a better arm, a lot more athletic. Cardale Jones has the bigger body, the bigger build, but Braxton Miller was also allowed or able to make the plays that Cardale Jones could just never really do. So let's go through some of his stuff. Career record 27-9 at Ohio State as a quarterback. I'm not counting the years that he played at wide receiver. So 27-9, went 2-1 against Michigan. 2013, and so he's the quarterback in 2012 when Ohio State. 2011. 2011, he was the quarterback at Ohio State. And was it 2011? Regardless, he was 2-1 against Michigan. Had the loss there, but was able to get 2 more back in Ann Arbor. So, or not in Ann Arbor. Had the loss in Ann Arbor, was able to get 2 back in his career against the Wolverines. So ended up with a winning record. Wow, I'm all over the place. Sorry, no national champ. I'm not going to count the national championship because he did not play for Ohio State in that year. He does have a ring, but according to his resume, he did not play in that year. So I'm not going to give him that national championship to argue. Of course, he's always going to have that ring, but for the sake of this argument, we're going to say that he did not have that national championship. Maybe should have had another one in 2015. We can talk about that as Ohio State fans till we're blue in the face. So, of course, left in 2015 after that year. Redshirted, I think, in 2014. Came back for his final year. I think got drafted as a definitely got played in the NFL as a wide receiver. I'm not mistaken. I believe he was drafted, I think, by like Houston or something, or maybe even like Tennessee. That sounds like a team that he would be drafted to. Anyways, was drafted as a wide receiver or played in the NFL as a wide receiver. I believe that he is a coach now. He's out of the NFL. He's been out of the NFL for some time now, but I believe he is now coaching, which is really, really cool. But that's what I have for Braxton Miller. Let's move on. Number 6, I have Julian Sayin. And maybe this is a little bit too high for Sayin, especially after the Miami game. I think the flashes are there. So, of course, he can fall in these rankings if he has a bad year next year, or he can rise up past Will Howard and past JT Barrett. I don't think he'll get past the top 3 here. But he definitely has the capability, if he has a really, really good year, to get up in these rankings the next time we do these. So, Julian Sayin from 2025, of course, the career record of 12-2, has the 12-0 season, has the win over Michigan. Like I've stated, my next point is here, he's 1-0 against Michigan, had the win there, which a lot of these quarterbacks, really can't say that they went undefeated against Michigan. A few of them can. Some of them cannot, unfortunately. So, it is what it is, but he is as of right now, undefeated against Michigan. And especially on the road in Ann Arbor, that's a really impressive feat. So, 12-2, of course, has the undefeated season, went 12-0. Goes on to the Big Ten Championship against eventual national champion, or not Oregon, Indiana. I hope I didn't just speak that into existence. Man, that would suck. Anyways, goes on to the Big Ten Championship, loses to Indiana. It's hard to say. I think most of Ohio State fans probably blame Jaden Fielding for that loss against Indiana. I think there was a lot of missed opportunities on the part of Julian Sayin. Definitely the quarterback sneak comes to mind. When he rolled out, he had the receiver there, or maybe he runs for it. Not a very good scrambler. A little bit of an improviser, can use his legs, but a little bit of that stage fright that kind of C.J. Stroud has. He can use his legs, but he really, really does not want to, for one reason or another. Maybe that was just the way he plays, or maybe that's just something in the back of his mind. We'll never know. We're not in his head. So, loses to Indiana in the Big Ten Championship game for the number 1 overall seed, then loses to Miami in the college football playoff. And that really, really sucks, because Sayin really was, that was probably one of his worst games as a quarterback for Ohio State. And I think a lot of people now, especially in hindsight, I think a lot of people have realized that Ohio State's schedule really was their own worst enemy, especially when they played teams. If you look in the preseason, we had, Texas, and we had Illinois, who was supposed to be really good. Michigan, of course, who was always going to be a tough test, who we haven't beaten up until that point since 2019. So that was always a really tough test for Ohio State. And then we had Penn State, who fell off a cliff. So we had really, really good teams on the schedule, or at least projected to be really, really good teams on the schedule, and they just didn't turn out that way. Texas was they were bad in the beginning of the year, and Ohio State's defense really, really stifled Texas's offense, and just made Julian Sayin be like, hey, if you can get us past midfield, we'll give you the ball right around then. If we get a good punt, our defense is going to hold. And that's exactly what they did. So they, of course, they escaped Texas, especially being at home also helped Sayin in his first ever start. So they beat Texas. Illinois was not what we were projected to be, but I also said that in my predictions. If you go back and look at this, I said a lot of people are projecting Illinois to be in the playoff, and a lot of people, and some people are even saying that they're going to go like 6-6. And I believe that the truth was in the middle, and I was kind of right. So Illinois was not what they were, propped up to be. Ohio State goes into Champaign, I think it is, and dominates them. And then Penn State, of course, we don't have to talk about that anymore. Franklin falls off a cliff, gets fired, and Penn State has the season that they had. And, Ohio State just kind of manhandled them in Columbus. And, it was not what we thought it was going to be. And there wasn't really any more tests after that. Of course, Michigan was the test, but, Bryce Underwood was just not ready for that type of game. Sharon Moore is not the type of coach that wins those games. He's the type of coach that lucks into those games, and that was proven last year. So, Sharon Moore was never the type of coach that was going to beat you. You were going to beat yourself, and Sharon Moore was basically going to guide you into that. He was never going to, shove you out of the way and say, we are better than you, so you're going to take it. No, that was never a thing. Sharon Moore was like, oh, you're going to give me this. Okay, I guess we'll take the win. And that's basically what happened. And in 2024, that is, not 2025, but in 2024. So, Sayin has the rough ending that he does have in the playoff and in the Big Ten championship, really in the postseason. Let's call it what it is, the postseason. But, it is what it is. I definitely think there's a lot of more room for growth for Sayin in this next year, especially with the gauntlet schedule that Ohio State has this year coming up. Of course, you got Oregon coming to Columbus, has a lot of guys coming back, and a lot of people are favoring them to win the national championship this year. You got Indiana. You're going to go to Indiana, a team that is really reloaded from their national championship run. And Curt Cignetti has propelled himself into a top 2, top 3. Even people are saying that he is the best coach in the country right now. Maybe some of that is recency bias. Maybe they're right, and they're just, it is what it is, and it sucks for Ryan Day and Ohio State. We got to compete with a coach of that caliber right now. But that's the best part about the Big Ten being the best conference in college football right now. So, yeah, Oregon, you got Indiana, you got Michigan at the end of the year. You got Iowa on the road. You got Texas on the road. So there's a lot of teams that are capable of beating Ohio State, and you really couldn't say that when Ohio State played teams that they did last year. So if Ohio State does make it to the playoff next year, the one thing that you're not going to be able to say about Ohio State is they're not going to be battle tested. So I think that is going to help Ohio State if they can get through the gauntlet that they have. Of course, if they, lose to some games that they shouldn't, and, lose three or four games, then they're not going to make the playoff, and it's going to be a failure of a season. And, you're only going to get one national championship out of Jeremiah Smith, and that's a travesty in itself. So let's move on here to Joe Thomas Barrett, one of people's favorite quarterbacks, Ohio State quarterbacks of all time, because of when he was on, it was great. It was fantastic. He was one of the best college football quarterbacks of that time period when he was on. The problem was it was such a roller coaster watching JT Barrett every week. The picture I have up here on this list is the Penn State game from the comeback. What people tend to forget was the very next week, Ohio State goes to Iowa and loses by like 28 points. So like the high and lows of that stuff. And I think JT threw like 3 or 4 interceptions in that game. And, the highest of highs that you get with JT Barrett, but you also get the lowest of lows. So that's why I have him above Sayin, because of his heights, but I'm not going to have him in the top 4 because of some of his lows. So career record of 38-6 through his 4 years at Ohio State. The winningest quarterback in Ohio State history, but that also comes with, you know, the territory of being a starting quarterback for all 4 years. Had a few injury problems as well, but that did not stop him. 4-0 against Michigan, the first quarterback to do that in the rivalry's history, the first and only quarterback to do that in Ohio State, Michigan. The rivalry, the game, the history of that rivalry. So, the really, really good accomplishment for Ohio State. And not even Ohio State, for JT Barrett. Of course, JT did only finish 2 of those games, but technically he was the starter for all 4, which Ohio State, of course, won. You know, 2 Big Ten championships. Of course, 2014 was the year that he was injured, but technically we'll give it to him. If you want to say 1 Big Ten championship, I'm not going to blame you for that. But the other Big Ten championship came in 2017. JT Barrett's last year, of course. JT gets injured in 2014. So if you want to count that, you can. If you don't, it is what it is. 2015, Michigan State goes to the Big Ten championship, of course, after beating Ohio State, and wins and goes to the playoff. 2016 was the Penn State year when Penn State blocked the field goal against Ohio State and goes on to the Big Ten championship game, defeats Iowa, I think, and then gets left out of the playoff for Ohio State. And then 2017, Ohio State plays Wisconsin and has that game, ruins Wisconsin's undefeated season and playoff hopes. And Ohio State does get left out of the playoff in 2017. But I also do believe that in 2017, Ohio State was not winning a game in the playoff. So, especially against Alabama and Clemson at the peak of their powers. And I think Georgia was in that playoff too, if I'm not mistaken. That might have been 2018. But, still right there. But anyways, 2 Big Ten championships and the national championship, of course, injured in that run. But we'll give it to him if you don't want to give it to him. Like I've gone back and forth on stuff on here. We'll give JT the national championship. If you still want to give like Braxton Miller the national championship too, since he was technically on the team. I just thought because JT played the majority of the season, the vast majority of the season, honestly, that you would give him the national championship there for his resume. But if you don't want to, that works as well. I'm not going to argue against that. But like I said before, I don't think that you can have him really any higher than 5, maybe even 6, if you want to put like a Julian Sayin above him or even Braxton Miller. I'm not going to argue. I might argue Braxton Miller. Julian Sayin, I think I disagree, but I can see where you're coming from. But I'm not going to have him any higher than the guys above him. So I'm not going to put any of the guys that are above him behind him for the specific reasons of, this was prime Urban Meyer and JT Barrett losing to teams that they should not have lost to. Of course, JT also had the one college football playoff appearance. Like I've stated before, they played Clemson and got shut out. That was the year that Clemson ended up winning the national championship. But like I said, 2016, the year that Penn State was left out of the playoff, Ohio State goes in, gets shut out by Clemson, and that was JT Barrett's only college football playoff appearance. Doesn't even score a point. So, and he's the only quarterback in this, in this list that has that. Every quarterback that has been to the playoff on this list has scored at least 1 point. JT Barrett can't say that. So, it is what it is. I love JT. I love his highs, but some of his lows were always really, really low, and that's why I have him at number 5. Number 4, maybe people are going to be mad at this, but I have Will Howard. So Will Howard, of course, comes in from Kansas State, and, after the whole Kyle McCord drama with him transferring out and going to Syracuse because he was not guaranteed the job, and Will Howard comes in, a veteran quarterback that does not have the greatest arm, but is really, really good with his legs and is able to give Ohio State another, dynamic of their offense with the quarterback run. Something that Ohio State really never had since Justin Fields in 2019 and 2020. So that really gave Ohio State a another dynamic to their offense with the quarterback run, and Ohio State used that in some ways in the national championship game against Notre Dame. Ohio State had a play where Will Howard was running out to the sideline, and Notre Dame was just so concerned with the quarterback run that they left Quinshon Judkins wide open in the middle of the end zone. Flips it, touchdown, and Ohio State goes on and ends up winning that game, of course. So, Will Howard with a career record of 14-2 loses to Oregon in the regular season. A game that Ohio State probably should have won, but because of the pass interference call on Jeremiah Smith on the last drive, and the slide, which I also think that Will Howard was down with 1 second left. He was calling timeout. People were calling timeout. I just think the refs, because of the field storming and the students in Oregon, they were just like, forget it. I don't even want to. We don't want to go through the headache of having all these people back off the field just for Ohio State to maybe even miss the kick and then have the whole thing happen again. So, they lose to Oregon, but then gets their revenge in the Rose Bowl. Of course, loses to Michigan in Columbus for the second time in a row, something that has not happened since I think like the 90s at that point. But has one of the worst games any Ohio State quarterback has had. Also believed that he was probably concussed in that game. Had the scramble. And then, I think it was Devin Brown that ended up coming in. And that was even worse because Brown did not have the arm talent that Will Howard does. And that's really saying a lot because Will Howard is not really known for his arm talent. But, 14-2, 0-1 against Michigan, of course, like I just said. 0 Big Ten championships, 0 appearances as well because of that loss to Michigan that propelled Penn State into the Big Ten championship game. Oregon beats Penn State and claims the 1 seed in the playoff. The one college football playoff appearance, which came with the national championship game, beats Tennessee in the first round and then destroys Oregon, survives against Texas, and dominates Notre Dame in the college football playoff, and basically runs through the gauntlet that was the 12 team, the first year of the 12-team playoff 2 years ago now, which is crazy to say, but that is really Will Howard's resume right now. Like I said before, his running ability gave Ohio State's offense a new dynamic. That was Jeremiah Smith's first year, of course, after Marvin Harrison Jr. leaving. That kind of left a void in the wide receiver 1 position. We kind of thought that might be Emeka Egbuka. But after maybe week 2, we kind of all figured that was Jeremiah Smith, and so did everyone else on that coaching staff. And Jeremiah Smith took it, never looked back, and Emeka Egbuka was perfectly satisfied and right now in the NFL doing really, really good things with the Buccaneers. And I think he was really satisfied with the outcome of that year, winning a national championship. So that was really, really good. Ohio State's offensive line, although not great, had a really, really good run in the playoff. Ohio State's defense was the best defense, one of, if not the best defenses in the country that year. You can argue what defense was better, either the 2024 or 2025 Ohio State defense. I think I more lean towards 2025, but I can also see the argument for both ways. But Howard had a really, really good team surrounding him. Drafted to the Pittsburgh Steelers, of course, this year. Did not play very much because Pittsburgh, of course, had Aaron Rodgers. You're not going to give, playing time in the regular season in a meaningful game to Will Howard over a guy like Aaron Rodgers. So hopefully he has a really good season ahead of him, or really good career ahead of him, I should say. Which sucks because I am a Browns fan, of course. Everyone knows that if you have been watching this channel for a longer period of time. But, it's Will Howard, so I'm always going to have, a soft spot for him, especially because he's a quarterback that won us a national championship, and that was the first time in 10 years that any Ohio State fan got to experience that, which was really, really cool. And hopefully Ohio State can do that in a little less time than before. But let's move on to number 3, and this is where we're probably going to have some disagreement. Number 3, I'm going to have Justin Fields. Justin Fields was the quarterback for Ohio State from 2019 to 2020, came in as a transfer from Georgia, and, basically lit it up as soon as he got to Columbus. And The first running play he had, I think it was like FIU, I think it was some non-conference game, and took it 75 yards, gone. And that 2019 team was probably my favorite team of all time, with the defense that it had, and Justin Fields and Olave and there's so many guys. J.K. Dobbins. There's so many guys on that team. That was there. Austin Mack is another good guy that I love. But Justin Fields, and this is more 2019. 2020 was a weird year, of course. The Big Ten starts the football season late. A lot of guys were not at their peak of powers. Justin Fields did not have a great year. Of course, like the big one was like Micah Parsons, a guy that was, of course, now that we know who Micah Parsons is in the NFL, sits out the 2020 year and prepares for the NFL draft. And, it is what it is. So a really weird year. I don't necessarily put as much weight on the 2020 year as maybe some other years because of Ohio State starting late. But that being said, let's go through some of his stuff. Career record of 20-2. Loses to Clemson in 2019, a game that Ohio State definitely should have won. Any Clemson fan out there that says that wasn't a fumble and a scoop and score for Ohio State is lying to you. So that game was a really, really good game, all-time classic, but the wrong team won in that game. Justin Fields has a game-losing interception on the last drive of the game for Ohio State in the end zone, and it is what it is. And I think Ohio State probably gives more of a fight to LSU in 2019 in that national championship game than Clemson did. Maybe even Ohio State wins that game, but I think LSU was kind of inevitable in that year, especially with all the weapons they had that year. So career record of 20-2, like I said. The Clemson game, I think it was like the Fiesta Bowl that year in the playoff, and then of course beats Clemson, gets their revenge, destroys Clemson, and we can go into that whole drama. I'm not going to get into that. Of course, like Dabo ranking Ohio State 11, and Ohio State coming out and destroying Clemson in the college football playoff semifinal. And then, of course, goes on to lose to yet another great team in Alabama in the national championship game. Probably Nick Saban's best team that he ever had in 2020. It sucks that it fell on the 2020 year, but they still got a national championship out of it. Nick Saban's last ever national championship. And Justin Fields had a really, it sucks. He had an up and down year in 2020, had a really, really, really good year in 2019. 1-0 against Michigan. Should have been 2-0 because Michigan dropped out of the game to basically save Jim Harbaugh's job. And, the rest is history with Jim Harbaugh. I can go into that for hours, but, I'm not going to. 2 Big Ten championships, defeats Wisconsin in 2019, and then defeats Northwestern in a really, really close game that should not have been that close, I remember. That was really, really scary. But has the 2 Big Ten championships, no national championships, has the bowl win against Clemson, like I stated before, and then the 2 college football playoff appearances. The only other quarterback to have more than 1 college football playoff appearance, at least right now, on this list is C.J. Stroud. That him and Justin Fields are the only 2 quarterbacks on this list to have multiple college football playoff appearances, which is really, really impressive. Everyone has like 1 or 0. But, no national championships out of that, but still a very impressive feat. And then was a Heisman finalist in 2019, like I stated a little bit before. Joe Burrow, of course, ended up winning the Heisman that year. But that was also the year that Ohio State had 3 guys in that national championship finalist. I think Justin ended up finishing last out of those guys, but it was Justin Fields, Chase Young, and J.K. Dobbins in the finalists there. Joe Burrow ended up winning it. I think it was like Kyler Murray, maybe I'm a year off there, but there's somebody else in there. I'm blanking on who. Oh, it was Trevor Lawrence. I'm a freaking idiot. Anyways, yeah, that was a really, really good year for Ohio State. My favorite team of all time at this point. Sucks that Ohio State could not get to the national championship that year, but what are you gonna do about it? You can't go back and change the past there. All we can really do is complain about it, like I'm doing right now. Anyways, let's move on to Dwayne Haskins. Rest in peace to one of the greatest quarterbacks, having only 1 year as a quarterback and still putting up the numbers that he did in 2018 was really, really impressive. Career record of 13-1. Was 2-0 against Michigan. I'm going to count the game in 2017. That was JT Barrett's last game. Of course, he got injured in the fourth quarter. Actually had like a scope on his knee before the Big Ten championship game, which I didn't even mention in 2017 for JT. But really, really impressive that he was able to do that. Anyways, comes in for JT Barrett in 2017 and clinches the win in Ann Arbor. By the way, those uniforms that Ohio State had against Michigan, if you don't know what I'm talking about, go look them up. I love those uniforms. Love them. And I really, really hope they bring them back sometime soon. But anyways, JT Barrett gets injured. Dwayne Haskins comes in 2017. Beats Michigan in Ann Arbor. Then in 2018, Ohio State, has the struggles that they do have in 2018, the up and down kind of roller coaster that Urban Meyer was kind of known for at Ohio State. And Michigan was coming in, only losing to, I believe, Iowa that year by a game-winning field goal on the road, which is a really, really tough place to play at Iowa. And, had one of the best defenses in the country, and Ohio State picked them apart. I think they won they scored like 62 points in Columbus that year. Still to this day remains the last time Ohio State beat Michigan in Columbus, which is really, really sad. Really, really sad to say. Hopefully Ohio State can change that this year, but we'll see. You got to see. So Dwayne Haskins comes in and sets the world on fire, really, at Ohio State. And this was like the period where it was like, we don't really need a running quarterback. If we just have wide receivers that can create separation, we can have these types of years. And obviously, we kind of went back to the scrambling quarterback, which was okay. And at least it produced a national championship years in advance, but it did. So Dwayne Haskins, 13-1 record at Ohio State. His only loss coming to Purdue on the road. If everyone knows that story, really, really cool story on Purdue. Just sucks that it had to happen against Ohio State. But came one game short of making the playoff. Won the Big Ten championship in 2018 against Northwestern. Really, really dominated Northwestern in that game. No national championship, like I said, but did have the bowl win against Washington in the Rose Bowl in 2018, of course, being Urban Meyer's last game as Ohio State's head coach. Retires for a few years, then becomes the Jaguars head coach, but we don't got to get into that. Was a Heisman finalist in 2018. I think this was the year that Kyler Murray went to the Heisman ceremony and then won the Heisman Trophy, but Dwayne Haskins was also right there at the ceremony. Really, a lot of Ohio State quarterbacks go to the ceremony and then just don't win it. I don't like Troy Smith is the last Ohio State quarterback to win it, and I don't even remember Troy Smith ever playing for Ohio State. I'm that young. Anyways, for his stats, which I've written down because he is, just saying surface level stuff about Dwayne Haskins it doesn't do him justice. So I wrote down some stuff. First all-time in Big Ten passing touchdowns in a season. Second in passing yards in a single game against Northwestern in 2018 in the Big Ten championship game. Ninth all-time for Ohio State career passing yards with 5,396. First in passing yards and completions in a single season in Ohio State history. Third in completion percentage in a single season. And second in career percentage. In his 1 year, that is. But, just saying those stats, in only 1 year, Dwayne Haskins set the world on fire. And it sucks that Ohio State could not get to the Big Ten, or not the Big Ten, the college football playoff. Their defense was a little suspect, was a little young. considering what we had. The weapons that Ohio State had were not fully developed yet, like the wide receivers. Offensive line struggled a little bit. But, Dwayne Haskins, it did not matter for Dwayne Haskins. And it sucks that what ended up happening to him. I definitely think that he had a long career as a NFL quarterback, whether that meant as a backup or not, honestly. Still being a backup in the NFL is a really, really good accomplishment. And if he didn't even go to the NFL, think about what other stuff came after his unfortunate death. Was the UFL and the XFL and all those other stuff that he could have gone to and proved himself again and found himself, because after he got drafted to Washington in 2020, I think he probably kind of lost himself a little bit. And it's really, really unfortunate what ended up happening to him. And I hope his family is doing well, and I hope he rests in peace. But the last one, and then we'll get out of here, is, of course, number 1, CJ Stroud. And this might be a really, really hot take. I think probably people might have Dwayne Haskins over CJ Stroud because of his record against Michigan. CJ Stroud played quarterback at Ohio State for 2 years, 2021 and 2022. You can count 2020 as like his backup, but he started at Ohio State for 2 years. Was 0-2 against Michigan, unfortunate. But my argument for that, if you put any of those two teams against Michigan, you can even count throwing 2023 Michigan in there too. Put any of those teams against, 2018 Ohio State, 2017 Ohio State, 2016 Ohio State. Tell me that Michigan probably does not win those games. CJ Stroud played two of the best Michigan teams that Michigan had in that era, and then played them pretty closely with a defense that was not very good. This was not, Jim Knowles came in, that 2022 was Jim Knowles' first year in his kind of learning curve to high level quality teams that he didn't really get a chance to play when he was at Oklahoma State. And the talent just wasn't there, especially in 21. 22, it was a little bit of players getting used to each other, and CJ Stroud still carried that team to an 11-1 season in 2022, and then a 10-2 season in his first year in 2021, with losses to Oregon and Michigan. 2022 was the loss to only Michigan. I'm talking about regular season. We're not talking about playoff yet, but CJ Stroud, a career record of 24-4. Like I said, losses to Oregon and then Michigan twice, and then Georgia in his last game in the college football playoff in 2022. No Big Ten championship appearance. Michigan won both those Big Ten championships in 21 and 22. No national championship. Played for the bona fide national championship in 2022 against Georgia because of what TCU was. One bowl win, the 2021 Rose Bowl against Utah, where he threw over 600 yards, and that was the Jackson Smith-Njigba game when Smith-Njigba and Marvin Harrison both caught 3 touchdowns each. So, and that was a back and forth game, and Ohio State comes back and kicks a game-winning field goal to win that game. Yet another example of Ohio State's defense being absolutely atrocious in 2021. One CFP appearance in 2022, of course, the loss to Georgia. At the game losing field goal at midnight, when he it wasn't Fielding. I forget the kicker's name, but he missed the field goal right as midnight came along on New Year's Day. So that was awesome. Great game. Thanks, guys. Anyways, one college football playoff appearance. Heisman finalist in both 21 and 22. I think came in second in 21 and then maybe third in 22. Or maybe I have those flipped. But was a Heisman finalist in both those years regardless. Who was it in 21? 21 was that? No, Bryce Young was 22. I forget who 21 was. Let me know. I'll look it up later maybe. But of course, C.J. Stroud did not win the Heisman in 2021. Probably, if he beats Michigan in 2022, probably wins the Heisman. But unfortunately, that did not happen. So, let's just go through like I kind of did with Dwayne Haskins, just kind of defend myself here. Second in 2021 and third in 2022 in Big Ten passing touchdowns in a season. That number one, of course, belongs to Dwayne Haskins. Second all-time in Ohio State single-season passing yards, 4,435 in 2021. And then he set the single-season record for completion percentage in 2021 and passer rating in 2021. Those are both C.J. Stroud's records. And then owns the school's top single-game passing total with 537 yards against Utah in the Rose Bowl. So not 600 yet, not close to 600, 537 yards in 2021 in the Rose Bowl. And then second in passing attempts in Ohio State history in 2021. That also had to do with the fact that Ohio State's defense could not really do anything. So Ohio State really had to pass the ball a lot in that game. But I just think that C.J. Stroud carrying the teams that he carried into the playoff, and losing to Michigan 2 years in a row sucks. But if if C.J. Stroud plays 2019 Michigan, 2017 Michigan, 2016 Michigan, even 2018 Michigan, he wins all of those games regardless what team you give him. You give him the 2018, the year that Ohio State played Michigan, give him that team and just swap the quarterbacks, or you give him 2022, 2020, not even 2021, 2022 Ohio State. That Ohio State team beats any of those Michigan teams, I think. So it's a testament to where Michigan went, and also we don't got to get into Connor Stallions and all that stuff too. But it's a testament to where Michigan was when C.J. Stroud was at quarterback. They were at their peak. Not their peak yet. Their peak was 2023, but they had a very, very major fall off right after those 3 years, 2021, 2022, 2023. That's really it for today. I've talked for a long time, almost an hour-long video today. So I really, really appreciate you guys. Or it's going to be over an hour long, actually. I can't do math, apparently. Sorry for that. But I really, really appreciate you guys getting all the way through here. Once again, let me know if you have any disagreements. Let me even know your guys' rankings down below. I really, really appreciate you guys watching. And I'll see you when I see you.